want to build a community and share other women's stories.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tea with TE, the She Who Leads podcast. Today, I've got Peggy Pauwels on with me, who is a partner at Deloitte Legal. Peggy, thanks so much for joining. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Terry. Lovely to be here. I feel very privileged to be invited to tea today.
Aw, and thank you so much. I mean, we feel honoured to have you on, and we obviously know you quite well, and I thought it'd be great for you to share your story with everybody. I'll let you start by sharing a little bit about Deloitte Legal, if possible, because I know there's lots of interesting things happening over there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll do the summary version, but it's quite exciting actually what we're building at Deloitte Legal. At the highest level, we are bringing legal together into a business context. We want to do law differently, and really our practice is all around bringing different disciplines together with our legal advisory colleagues, but also embracing technology, our experiences like my own from industry, how we can advise our clients how to transform and improve their legal and contracting environments. And the contracting part is particularly where I'm passionate about, and it's a subset of our practice, but it's really exciting because it's really bringing our strategy to life in terms of bringing our lawyers, our consultants, our technologists, and our experienced contract managers together. So it's a really exciting journey, and it really is fascinating to be part of it and to be building that business.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's, as we've talked about a little bit, it's a different concept, but one I'm sure will certainly be taking off, and I think you'll be trendsetters in the legal world for sure.
Well, that's the aim. That's certainly the ambition, but it resonates really strongly for me personally, because I think it has been a common thread throughout my career, sort of building that bridge between the legal world and the business world, having started my career as a lawyer myself, but then pivoted into business. I see the value of that and the importance of having that bridge. Both areas are important, but it's how you find the way to really bring them together in harmony almost, and really strengthen each other in the business context. So yes, really exciting.
Very exciting. And Peggy, I'd love to get into that in a little bit more detail. So if okay, it'd be really helpful, I think, just as a starting point, to just give us a whistle-stop tour in terms of the Peggy Pauwels career and how you've got to where you are today.
Yeah, so as I said, I started my career as a lawyer. Never really had the ambition to be, like a practicing lawyer, solicitor. My background, I'm from Belgium, so I talk about being a lawyer rather than a solicitor, because we don't have that distinction in Belgium between a solicitor and barrister. But I was attracted to the law from an earlier age because I wanted to change the world. I've been a human rights activist from I think the age of 14 or something, writing diligently my letters in support of the monthly campaigns for Amnesty International. And I guess that sort of drew me very strongly to understanding law. Always had a sense that I wouldn't be practicing in law, but using my knowledge and my skills, as I said, to change the world, but then realized being a human rights lawyer is not my path, but I can use my skills in a business context and drive change there, which again has been quite the constant in my career. So interesting. So I started as a lawyer, and I have to say, although it wasn't my sort of number one ambition coming out of my law degrees and studies, I'm grateful for the grounding and the education that it gave me to sort of be practicing, working with clients, having court experience and all of that. But equally, I was very happy moving out of private practice into business. And that's really been the start of my, I guess, maybe more entrepreneurial career, working for startups. And it was already firsthand experience how law and business meets.
Yeah.
So there was the telecoms market in Europe was being liberalized. And so a lot of startups were looking for lawyers to help them interpret the legal and regulatory regime, which was new. And so I thought, that sounds interesting. I haven't got a clue, but I can learn just as anyone
Yeah.
else. And so I embarked on that journey, and I landed a fantastic role, which was more like a regulatory role at a startup. But because it was a startup and because it was an American startup that was establishing in Europe, the role was very much around helping leadership to understand what could be done. So whilst I needed to study the laws and regulations, my role within the company was bringing that to practice and advising, the CEO, the marketing officer, the technical team
Mm-hmm.
on how we could roll out our network and how we could provide our services. So first-hand experience of how, legal skills can really make a difference within business. And that was just, for me, a confirmation, and that was my path. That took me into BT,
Yeah.
British Telecom, long career there, different roles. It was also enabled me to basically deliver on my dream to work and live in London. So that was always been part of my ambition. So BT took me to London, started in the legal team, but again, a role that was very closely aligned to supporting the business, which I was very happy doing. And then eventually, through working with business leaders, made that change into a business role, taking on what we called at BT business management role for one of our geographies, supporting large client accounts, which then gave me an insight into sales, delivery, managing large P&Ls, which are, in these large outsource or service management environments, they're like running your little business, right? And so just having that holistic view of what it takes to run a business was fascinating. And that was the start probably of that transformation mindset, having to be very creative on your P&Ls. How do you generate top line growth, but also bottom line growth, and transforming your workforce, your processes? Where does technology play a role? So that kind of that environment, that ecosystem, kind of got me into transformation. And I guess I reached a point where after so many years at BT, I was at a pivotal moment where I could stay probably until retirement and have a very fulfilled career, or I could leave and explore the world that was outside. And there was a lot happening at that time. So I'm talking around 2015, 16, and the fintech and the startup community, innovation in London in particular, was just so exciting, and I wanted to be part of it. And so I left. I didn't have anything lined up, but I was adamant that my corporate experience of having sort of transitioned through these various roles, understanding what it takes to run a business, but also how to transform, how to scale, I thought there was something there and that I had something to offer. So I took my confidence and took that leap of faith, and that took me into my subsequent roles. I spent a couple of years at Capita, which is an interesting organization in its own right, because it's made up of these large contracts, outsourcing contracts, and smaller businesses. And then eventually into Visa, where which is, of course, a well-established organization, but where they embarked on quite a large transformation, particularly around their commercial environment than deal environment. So quite different stages, taking me, ultimately to join Deloitte.
Yeah, which is great. And I think an incredible journey, and definitely not the traditional legal route. And I think it is much more commercially focused avenue that you've gone down. I think not many people do. I know that you can get, obviously, from an in-house legal perspective, you are working very closely with the businesses you work with, but actually owning your own P&L and working in that way, I think is a very different outlook to thinking then how you take that into such as the role that you've got today.
Yeah. It's true. I was telling someone that's just joined the team, that it's there's been certainly times where I cursed myself for making that change, because there is something quite comfortable, perhaps, being a legal advisor. You can be very closely aligned to the business and advise and guide, but you're not holding the ultimate decision.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a comfort in that. Whereas if you step into the other side, in the business side, and you need to take that decision, you know, as a P&L owner, you're ultimately responsible and accountable, and you need to take that decision, and the consequences of that decision are on you. So it leaves you very exposed. And I've certainly, you know, in the beginning of that transition, felt very exposed and thought multiple times, why have I done this? But it just part of, I guess, maybe my personality and that inner drive of pushing boundaries. It certainly stretched me a lot and challenged me a lot. But yeah, I just wanted to call that out. It's not always that straightforward to make that shift.
No, I agree. And I think this is evident, Peggy, just from obviously having got to know you a little bit, that I think your want to take these leaps and to not necessarily stay in your comfort zone is something that I think you have just followed throughout your career, and I think has shaped you as the person that you are in your role today.
That's right. And you know, it is driven from, you know, that inner passion, I think, or an inner drive. It's always been there, and it certainly has shaped my career, and it shaped the person that I am today. You know, pushing those boundaries, changing perception, and not just transforming the environment that I'm working in, but transforming myself in a way. You know, you get to know yourself as you take these risks, and that you expose yourself. So it's definitely also been a journey of growth at a personal level, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about your journey, you have mentioned you're not, I mean, you have sometimes been the only woman in the room. And that's not easy, I don't think. I think it's something that you have to be quite a strong character to know how to navigate. So how did you navigate those situations without worrying about the fact that you were the only female in that room?
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, things have changed throughout my career, but you know, 20 years ago, especially in a telco environment where you know, it was very male dominated. And for sure, I have many actually entertaining stories of turning up as an only woman, or, you know, all female negotiation team, for instance, where literally walking into the room, and it was a supplier actually, 3 men just rubbing their fingers when they saw us, thinking, oh my God, this is going to be exciting. Not about this is going to be an exciting negotiation, but just the prospect of negotiating with 3 women in this case. So yes, do you know, I guess I've never really wanted to give in to the narrative of male female. I've never really wanted to concede to that it was a thing. And I maybe stubbornly have always focused on I guess my strength in terms of my capabilities and my skills and what I had to offer, and then let the results almost, you know, do the talking. And I remember, you know, being invited to Women Network speeches, and, you know, sharing experiences. And I've always made the point that I personally don't get upset about men being men and, you know, going off to the pub. And, you know, it was you know, the differences were very stark a couple of decades ago. But I've always sort of questioned why we needed to focus on that much. I always
Yeah.
to sort of just hone into my own confidence and my own, as I said, my own skills, and let the results talking. Yeah.
Yeah. Where did you grow up in an environment where you were quite independent and that's where that comes from? I think not every woman, and I'm with you. I feel like we shouldn't, and especially now, I feel like we shouldn't have to draw a line between where the gender is, but I do feel like there is still disparity. And I think that's why these conversations are still ongoing. But where do you think that comes from? Is it kind of an inner independence? Is it just how you've always been? Where do you think that has stemmed from?
Oh, it's probably, it's definitely a combination of nurture and nature, right?
Yeah.
So you have the personality that you have,
Yeah.
that risk taking, stepping out of my comfort zone, that's probably part of my DNA.
Yeah.
But then, of course, the environment in which you grow up in, I come from humble backgrounds. My father was a self-made man.
Okay.
So, an inspiration in that sense of how you can, when you push yourself, you can grow. But then equally, my own personal journey, it's not been easy in terms of finding who you are and being comfortable with who you
Yeah.
are. I was bullied when I was younger for the one being different. I wasn't wearing the same clothes. I had crazy hair. I was interested in stuff, different stuff than my peer group. Body shaming, all of that I had to tackle with, and I guess it shapes you, right?
Yeah.
In my case, I think it just maybe made me, determined to prove them wrong. And maybe that's my stubbornness coming out, but I didn't want to give into that, and I wanted to prove them wrong. And it's probably, particularly in the earliest start of my career, maybe being that burning, incentive, almost like, let me show you, you think I can't do this, or you think I'm not good enough, let me show you and prove you wrong. But over the course of my career, I think it has changed into, okay, I know I've got something to offer. I know that maybe my being different, not just how I look or how I show up and how I think, that combination of all of that, maybe that's actually my superpower. Maybe that's something that actually is a value add, within a team or within an organization. So I've learned to sort of lean into it, probably into my difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you gave an example when you were going to BT, and you're chief counsel in the regional divisions, and then there was the CEO. And I think this was, you kind of mentioned that was a bit of a validation point for you in terms of that.
Yeah. Well, and yes, and so I think that external sponsorship is really important. But it's true. It was so was at BT, sort of what we call chief counsel, so running the legal and regulatory team for our Benelux organization, but working very closely with the leadership and very closely aligned to the business. And it was the then Benelux CEO who sort of said, well, we're going to make some changes in the leadership team. Why don't you take over this business management role? Because we've seen you in action. We like, how you're thinking and what you bring to the team, and we think you can do this. And and that is sponsorship, right? That is someone really believing in you and validating that what you have to offer applies in a different context as well. And that's just fantastic. That just is it's just so, that having that support and that validation is just does magic and wonders for someone's confidence, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you have, and you can obviously speak to this better than me, but maybe having had the variety of roles that you have had, do you think that has empowered you a little bit to step out of your comfort zone and think, actually, each time I go for one of these things, I know I don't know what I'm doing, and so I'm just kind of going with it. and trusting the
Yeah,
fact that I know I'll get there.
yeah, and that's definitely been my guiding kind of principle, or my narrative in internally. As I said, I curse myself at the same time of
Yeah.
embracing a new challenge, because like, why am I upsetting everything again, and why am I starting from scratch in a new context, in a new role, new
Yeah.
organization? But I always tell myself, well, what's the worst that can happen? I can only give it my all. Clearly, people believe in me. I have a track record, of course, ups and downs, but you learn through that. You take that experience with you. So even if this next step doesn't work out, I will have learned.
Yeah.
I will come out stronger, and I think that's definitely been my guiding principle throughout. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And as somebody who is a leader, such as yourself, and obviously you are in leadership roles, I think it's something that can be said for obviously acknowledging that you need to be confident, but equally as a leader, and I think particularly as females, I think we're more aware of empathy and managing emotions within management positions. But what have you had to think about during kind of going through these leadership transitions throughout your career?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question, but a hard one to answer, in the sense that I think it's grown. That leadership style, how my leadership style has definitely evolved
Mm-hmm.
through my experiences, through the people I've worked with, seen great examples of leadership, and having had fantastic role models, and then equally have seen not so great examples, and understanding, I never want to show up in that way. So it's definitely been work in progress. For me, the change, there's definitely, this is relatively recent, probably in the last 5 to 10 years, a shift of learning about vulnerability and empathy, and again experiencing firsthand the power, how impactful that is when you allow, well, you understand it first, and then you
Yeah.
allow and lean into it. I think that for me is definitely made me a much more empathetic leader than I was in early in my career. I mean, I'm a very driven person, and I was very, probably initially very, vision, execution,
Yeah.
delivery, and maybe not necessarily understanding how I could take a team with me. But the pivotal moments is really when I understood about vulnerability, and actually it comes with it is so closely linked to confidence and understanding yourself.
Yeah.
It's not until you really understand what you're good at, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and having the confidence to share that with your team, that's when you can be vulnerable in a way that it enables and empowers the rest of the team. The real moment where I sort of experienced it in a really strong way was during COVID. So I joined Visa, I think, a couple of months before COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
and the team had to be transformed. So changes in the existing team, new recruitments, and all of that happened over COVID. And I think it was probably because of COVID that the conversations, existing team, new, the recruitment, new and onboarding new members within the team during a time where you were isolated and you only had video to sort of strike up a relationship. It shifted the dialogue. It really, I guess, helped us and maybe forced us to have a different conversation, and work with each other, got to know each other in a much different way than maybe than the way we did before COVID.
Yeah.
But it was a way for me and my team that it was very empathetic. It was very, we were talking about values, we were talking about what drives ourselves as people, and by extension we then had a narrative of how we're going to do this change and how we're going to deliver for the business. So it was really an eye-opener to sort of go through that, and I know the team at the time felt exactly the same, you know, how we all changed through that experience and how we all came together in a much stronger way. So yeah, that for me probably has been the pivotal moment in experiencing vulnerability and empathy
Yeah,
firsthand.
to actually then use it in a positive way, which I think a lot of us changed how we were as leaders through COVID. I think we had to, right? I think it was such a strange time for all of us to navigate. And I think we were just trying to not only get through it, but also feel as though you could support people, but just through a screen and you could never see them, which was so strange.
But at the same time, still deliver, you know, on the business objective.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think maybe there is still people, you know, there might be a perception out there that the leadership and in a business context and vulnerability and empathy don't go together. And I would advocate, you know, to the contrary, you know, it's only when you truly engage with people, understand where they're coming from, that you can empower them, you can raise them, you can help them exceed, you know, and outgrow their capabilities. And that, you know, if you do that in a business context, you know, the power that gets unleashed is formidable and does translate into business results.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I think even just from us being in the search side, we saw that businesses were performing 10 times over what they had been doing years prior. And I do think that was because of the nature of some of the relationships that were forming and because of that vulnerability that was being shared between teams. I do think naturally it brought people closer. And I think when you have that sense of closeness, you feel like, okay, I owe it to this person to give them as much as I possibly can. It's an interesting time, but I do think a lot of us took some positives away from the pandemic for sure. This is something that I know we talked about a little bit, and it's an interesting topic, which is imposter syndrome. And I know that it's a struggle for a lot of people, and that's probably why I have keep going kind of into like, where do you think this confidence piece comes from? Because I appreciate not everybody does have that, and I'm not saying that you won't have this mindset, but I think when you are thinking about confidence and how to be your authentic self at work, and then say something comes up and it makes you just question everything that you have thought, how do you navigate that? What's your thought process around dealing with this?
Yeah, I was at a training event yesterday with other female partners, and we were talking about imposter syndrome. And one of the ladies said, you know, we should stop calling it a syndrome, but it's more an incident or an event. So and that I relate to that. There's definitely been moments where I felt, you know, like, oh my God, I don't belong here. I am not worthy, or I'm not clever enough. How, you know, and so how am I going to wing this? But again, it's about, well, hang on a minute, checking in with yourself, I guess, is the best way to describe it. So I certainly have, you know, imposter incident moments where I feel a bit like, okay, and definitely when I come into a new environment, you get to know the people, you have to establish your relationships here. Everything is new. You don't know what you don't know, all of that. There's definitely that kind of feeds that insecurity. But at the same time, it's then checking back in with yourself, saying, well, I'm here for a reason. I you know, I don't have to start from scratch. Although I'm in a new environment, you know, it doesn't negate my experience and the past. And so just again checking in with yourself that you know, you have all this experience and knowledge that you can confidently and should confidently rely on, is the way that I try and balance those inner voices, you know, the my confidence side and my insecurity side. They talk quite regularly, but you know, how you balance it is just checking in with yourself. Yeah.
And I think that is something I will take away from this, so thank you so much. It's an imposter incident, not a syndrome. I like it. I think you might have just set a different trend here, Peggy. I think this is another one that you're setting. Um,
I'll take the
I hope.
credit. It was a colleague that
Oh
launched it, but
yeah, okay.
I
We'll
think
have to
it's
let her
definitely
have the. Yeah, we'll have to give her some quotes in the credits.
definitely.
Um, Another big thing, and obviously this I think is something that we all want to know the secret answer to. I don't think anybody's got this quite right yet, is the balance of being in a role such as yours. You're in a leadership position, the stakes are high, there's this constant pressure, I think, but at the same time you also need to live. And I know that you live by this as a philosophy. And I think just actually when you talk about kind of yourself, I think this comes through as who you are as well. So would just love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, work-life balance, it's all about boundaries. The work never stops. It is relentless. You can work 24/7 and still your to-do list is not ticked off, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about, well, I work to live rather than live to work. So that's where it starts. I enjoy working. I get great energy from it.
Mm-hmm.
But there is life outside work, and for me, it's always been actually about boundaries, and being quite clear about those boundaries and sticking to them. So there's a discipline that comes with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's again, it just, own up to what works for you personally. So for me personally, I'm a morning person. I don't
Okay.
mind setting my alarm an hour earlier to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, I'm at my best in the morning, which means that, come 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, I get tired and I
Yeah.
feel that my creativity and my just the way you analyze problems or the way you engage in certain situations, I'm just not at my best. And so I've learned to be comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
saying and giving myself permission to say, look, I don't need to deal with this today.
Now. Yeah.
Tomorrow, exactly. Tomorrow morning, first thing, I'll definitely be on it and I'll probably have a better answer on how to deal with it than, this evening. So it's giving yourself permission, but it starts with knowing what works for you. And being clear, as I said, my team, my colleagues know that I'm a morning person. I'd
Yeah.
love, first thing in the morning, I'd like to get a workout, scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
So I can do emails, but maybe not on a call because I'm probably
Yeah.
in the so
Won't be able to talk.
just be open about that. And it's funny actually because there's definitely been times where fellow colleagues, when you sort of pack up come 6 o'clock and you go home and they're sort of shouted across the room like, oh yeah, part-time, here we go, she's off again. And whatever, I would always say, yes, I'm working part-time, see you in the morning. So that's fine. The other thing is actually being truthful and respectful of my family. So I juggle quite a complicated close family life. We sort of separate our time between London and Belgium, and so there's quite a logistical challenge that comes with it. And my husband, he's super supportive of my career, but there's one ask that he has, and that is he wants me to be present when I'm home. He'd rather that I stay at the office an hour longer, or if I have to work at the weekends, which of course happens,
Mm-hmm.
that I tell him and that we're very clear on when that working slot happens so that he knows and the rest of the family knows. He hates it when I pretend I'm totally relaxed and then, sort of between cooking and sort of playing with the kids, I'm sort of doing
Yeah.
work emails. He hates it. And he's right. And so he calls me
Yeah.
out on it because I'm not present. And so again, it's, being respectful to the family and saying, okay, this is my quality time. This is what I need to protect. And the rest can wait.
Yeah.
And should wait. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the exceptions should be exactly that. There should be exceptions. When you have to make a bit of allowances. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There are times when work has to take priority and vice versa. And I think, as you say, there's having the boundaries that support that, I think, are a very good model for helping you to put, I guess, to put things in place so you're not doing everything all at the same time, all at once, which is
Yeah.
not good. We're almost at the end of our conversation, Peggy, which I'm very sad about. Just a couple more questions to go. This one is something that I always ask anybody that's on the Female Leadership podcast, which is really around advice for future female leaders. And it doesn't have to be females, of course, but obviously this is focused on that. So what would your one piece of advice be?
Lean into your authenticity. And that is leaning into your personal journey, you know, what makes you you. Figure out what your superpower is,
Yeah.
and just fully embrace it and go with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great superpower to have. And thank you so much for sharing everything that you have today. And your journey has been inspiring. It really has. One last question, because we are on the Tea with Tea podcast, and I have seen you sipping a hot beverage.
Yes.
So I'd love to know, what is your tea of choice?
My tea of choice is peppermint tea.
Okay, nice.
I'm actually a coffee drinker, but
Okay.
I love peppermint tea, so it's peppermint.
Well, Peggy, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Hope to do this again at some point, but I'm sure there's lots of learnings that people will take away from today. So really, genuinely, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.